To bring in former McCain presidential campaign manager Rick Davis. Rick, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
We should point out that O'Malley and Huckabee have suspended their campaigns. We're speculating this morning on who they'll back and whether or not they'll go for Trump or Cruz or Rubio. What's your reaction to last night?
Well, I think it was a big night for Republicans. Not only the story that there was such a big turnout. I mean, you know, probably close to 45,000 new participants. And that's really amazing for a state like Iowa that, you know, is pretty traditional in its turnout model. So that obviously, I think, had a big impact on the outcome, too. You saw a really phenomenal win by Cruz. It was large and deep. He won in virtually every sector of the state, with virtually every sector of the electorate. He wasn't just elected the winner in the caucuses by evangelicals. It was a really broad-based win. And then on the flip side, sort of underperformance by Trump and an overperformance by Rubio. We saw the three lanes of the Republican Party really in action last night. You know, the outsider lane, you know, represented by Donald Trump. You know, the sort of movement conservative evangelical lane by Rubio, or not by Rubio, by Cruz. And then by Rubio, you know, I think he's emerging as sort of one of the go-to guys within the mainstream Republican ranks.
You mentioned the non-evangelical vote going for Cruz last night. What was that based upon? How can he build upon that for New Hampshire? Because I think that's an interesting point, looking at this state that maybe is not as socially conservative as Iowa. You know, how is Cruz going to use that in New Hampshire?
Yeah, well, Cruz did a phenomenal job of organization. You know, he really feels like he has got the best organized campaign in the entire field. And I think he's probably right. I mean, what he was able to do last night was not only build off his base of evangelical voters, but really from a grassroots perspective, technology, manpower, people on the ground, put out a lot of folks on Election Day so that he could get his teams to the caucuses. Now, New Hampshire's a primary, right? It's much more of a momentum kind of play. Turnout's important, but as he moves south, you're going to spread this field pretty thin. They're not used to organizing. Rubio doesn't have election teams in every state. Trump, noticeably, hasn't really fielded teams in any of these later on states in the South. So the question is, does Rubio's organization, does the investment he's made financially and manpower in these other states going to actually enhance his ability to turn out the vote?
Rick, we're talking all morning about Rubio, Cruz, and Trump as it relates to Republicans. If there's one person who could emerge in New Hampshire or elsewhere outside of those three, who's it going to be?
Well, Kasich, you were just talking about on the show, has sort of put all his chips on New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And he's getting some reward for that. I mean, he's sort of got the old McCain strategy of, I'm not going to Iowa, I'm not going to be distracted, I'm going to go to town hall after town hall, I'm going to go in my bus around with the press and with the people of New Hampshire and really try to win New Hampshire. And, you know, there's been some reward for him. He's up in the, you know, high teens, or not high teens, middle teens. He's considered, you know, in basically a dead heat for third place. And so the question is this going to pay off for him? We'll see what kind of bump Rubio gets from his performance in Iowa. We'll see what kind of downturn the really sky-high Trump numbers, do they come back down to the field a little bit? And if so, could be a really competitive New Hampshire primary.
Did it hurt Trump that there were so many headlines that if Trump wins Iowa, he's unstoppable? And people came out and said, well, I'm going to stop him. That is the anti-Trump vote, that there are limits to this social media insult-driven campaign that he's got going.
Yeah, well, I would say, too, it's institutional. Iowa loves to trip up front runners. The minute Donald Trump became a front runner, the people of Iowa were saying, oh, we can change that. I mean, you know, they traditionally love to poke the eye of
right. Even Cruz said if Trump wins Iowa, he's unstoppable.
Yeah, and I think that was part of the device of saying, you know, hey, we've got to really pay attention here. You know, this could be a real problem for the conservative movement. He's not a real conservative. You know, he's not ideological. His ideology is winning. That's not real. And so I think they've used that aspect of it pretty effectively.
Did him missing the debate hurt him, you think?
Yeah, look, I mean, you have to say missing the debate hurt him, right? The conclusion was if you skip a debate and you win, it was like irrelevant, right? You didn't care. But if you skip a debate and you lose, you have to say that you made a mistake skipping that debate.
Yeah. Doesn't he come out of this a kingmaker? Even if he doesn't win the Republican nomination, he has the potential now to mobilize millions of people towards the candidate that he wants to get behind.
That's assuming he can sustain a campaign that right now sort of has a black eye. The question for Trump is, without an organization, without the support of a grassroots network, he's really a media-inspired candidate with a following that is not a traditional Republican primary voter or caucus goer. So can he hold that all together in a very non-traditional campaign fashion? You know, look, I mean, campaigns tend to reward people who are well-organized and well-funded. And that's what we saw last night with Cruz. It's not yet clear whether or not Trump can sustain a campaign, especially when you get into these states that are winner-take-all. You know, in winner-take-all states, you know, you don't get any credit for number two.
Because he doesn't have the liquidity. I mean, Trump has billions in assets, but he doesn't necessarily have the liquidity to keep it going. Well, if he's going to have to start paying for it.
It's an expensive proposition. And one of the other things that people aren't really talking much about is that he's not going to be able to fund his campaign in the general election, right? I mean, you're talking billions of dollars. And so one of the things that you have to consider is, why isn't he building a finance organization to support a campaign that he claims is going to win? Right now,
part of the narrative, though. He doesn't want to take anybody's money.
Maybe
That's
he's never
part
really
of it.
expected to win.
Yeah, could be.
Rick, great stuff. Thanks so much for joining
Thank
us.
you.
Appreciate it very much. Rick Davis coming up.